Joining me now on the Knicks Film School podcast. It has been far too long because our guest today, he doesn't want to work. He's just lazy. He just sits around. I should probably ask him what he did all summer. I mean, I don't remember seeing his name come up on my Twitter feed at all. He is the GOAT. There's only one GOAT of New York sports reporting, and it's him. And he knows that I think that about him. It's not just because he's here. I refer to him as that in the newsletter and on pods all the time. Ian Begley of SNY. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, John, man. Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I don't take them lightly. I thank you very much. It was a light summer, so yeah, I'm just refreshed and ready to go. Let's roll the balls out.
Dude, I'm so fucking tired. It was supposed to be relaxing.
Yeah, no.
July and August is relaxing.
Not this one. Maybe next year.
Yeah, well, okay. So before we get to the topic that, I think 85% of the people listening to this don't want to hear about. Yeah, I'm going to try not to spend that long on it. I do have to ask you a couple questions just about the summer from your vantage point, because you were my, and again, I ask Andrew, I say this when you're not on the program, you were my guiding light that I followed in terms of when you put something out, I was like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this thing.
Wow.
It's just, listen, we've been around the block a few times here. You were so measured every step of the way. And I don't know if you'll say it. You have certainly not told me this. Let me just make this clear. I am going on the assumption that you knew so much more than you could report because you're the best, and you do not put things out unless they are as rock solid as the table that I'm knocking out right now. Was this summer?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, was this summer more challenging because of all of the noise that was out there? And God knows there was a lot of noise from your perspective as far as how you did your job.
Yeah, I think this was tough. I mean, I think just for me, I'm so neurotic as it is. Like I always, every summer's tough, but this one was tough because of just the moving parts and the slow roll up, the extremely slow roll up to talks actually happening. And then the idea that you kind of get to a place where it might happen and who's going, who's coming. And yeah, it was, I love it. I really enjoy it, but it's tricky because for this one in particular, there was a lot out there leading up, but also in the aftermath in ways that you don't see that much anymore at this point with, where the league is. There were a lot of details.
Can I ask you to expand upon that?
Yeah.
What you mean by that?
I think that the reports, the details of the reports that emanated, leading up to it, in terms of just, I guess, ESPN, first of all, with the RJ Barrett piece, and then kind of the details of the deals, the offers that were on the table, not on the table, from ESPN and other outlets. I mean, you don't see that, I think, as much, at least from my vantage point. And so I think it just tells you that there were different parties here who were seeking to put out different parts of what was happening. And that's what you get in negotiations. So that's not all that uncommon, but just the level of detail, particularly in the aftermath, surprised me a little bit. And I say that because to spin it forward, a lot of players were named in talks. And I just wonder, I don't think that it'll cause a huge kind of rift in the locker room between players and an organization, particularly in this one with the Knicks and the players that were named. But it just, I wonder if there are some sensitive feelings now in the aftermath of this whole thing.
I really want to direct our attention to a particular tweet, which you spoke with Zach, the Woj tweet, the last Woj tweet. Yeah. And you addressed it on that podcast, and I'm not going to ask you to revisit it because I thought you addressed it succinctly in terms of how these things are fluid and people's memories are what they are, and different people say different things to different other. We don't need to go through it again. I will. In terms of the response to the trade, did the response to the trade color your opinion further as to what went down and how it went down?
Well, I think where my mind goes is, could the Knicks have made an offer that Utah had to say yes to? Now, depending on who you're talking to, and when I say that, I'm referencing people that, to me, have a pretty good track record on this stuff. Some people, are of the opinion, of the mind, that it would have taken the Knicks like a ton for Utah to say yes for various reasons. Other people, again, I respect, would say no, that Utah just did what was best for them, which is what they've said publicly. To get at the truth on this one, you're going to have to put Danny Ainge under oath. But I do think that, I think one thing that is true is the Jazz, high-ranking members of the Jazz, were upset when William Wesley was at the courtside of the playoff game, Jazz Mavericks. Did that lead to them then saying, we're never going to trade Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks? I don't think so. I mean, I think they're rational decision makers, and they made a deal they felt was good. Did it factor in at all to how things played out? Maybe a little bit, but again, no one's going to really get to the truth of this thing unless you were on the phone, in the room, Danny Ainge under oath. We're never going to get that. So it's all going to be kind of conjecture, hearsay. But when you talk about the reaction to the trade, that's what stood out to me the most.
And the other thing, so that was very interesting to me. And the other thing, just from a fan standpoint, what was interesting to watch was, so the RJ thing, you had it first. I'm just going to throw that out there. And you phrased it in such a way where if you were a person reading your report, you could say, oh, well, who knows who wants to trade RJ Barrett? Maybe the janitor at MSG wants to trade RJ Barrett. Maybe and
been a good source. He's been a good source for me for years. I always run with his stuff.
Leon's cabinet. I'm going to call it the cabinet. Leon's cabinet. Who knows who's in the cabinet? You never know. Maybe they got the ushers in there chiming in. So you had that, and you put it out the way you did, and the response. And I think the response was a lot of like, well, we don't know what this really means. It's not indicative. And then of course, over the course of the last month, I guess, or whatever it is, 3-4 weeks, it has come out that, yes, there were sure some decision makers that were willing to put RJ Barrett in the trade. I'm just curious, again, from your vantage point, when did you see that coming? Did you know that was going to come the way it did when you put that out there, that there was going to be a lot of hand wringing, shall we say, about his name being put out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yes, whenever you're talking about a player that's that important to a segment of the fan base, I mean, I hate to say blank and then say Knicks fans feel this way. I think it's ridiculous when someone says that, because this is a big fan base, varied opinions, as you know very well, John. So I'm sure some Knicks fans were fine including RJ Barrett in the deal. But I think also when you talk about a player you've drafted, I think some fans really appreciate the idea of being in on the ground floor of a player you drafted, watching that player develop, having that player be a big part of the team that you're rooting for's future success. So that's where I think emotions get involved when a player like RJ Barrett mentioned in trade talks. I think a team like a Knick person might spin it as, hey, you're very good. Utah wanted you, and that's why this is where it was. But I think the truth is, again, you said it. There were people there with New York that were willing to put RJ Barrett out there to try to get Donovan Mitchell here. Obviously, ultimately, Leon Rose decides not to do that, and the Knicks are where they are today. But yeah, it's just fascinating. Just the level of detail that had come out in the aftermath of the thing.
I'm gonna ask you two more, and then we're gonna move on. I think this will be the 8th time I've said on this podcast, and then we're gonna leave it behind for good. And I'm sure this time will be the real time.
John, can I say this though?
Please.
Like, yeah, I get it. You like a fan. If I'm a fan, I'm turning the page. I'm ready for preseason. I care about who's on the roster. But these decisions that were made and the ultimate outcome of the trade, him going to Cleveland, that's going to have ramifications for your franchise, the franchise you root for. So yeah, I understand wanting to turn the page, but I think it's also important to see that this decision and the decisions that were and were not made are going to impact this year and years going forward.
A quick opinion question: would you be shocked if this was everything that just happened was the defining moment of the Leon Rose tenure? That would not shock me. Would it shock you?
The only reason I would say no is because I have to think that whatever is next in terms of, disgruntled star player, okay. I have to think whatever's next, the Knicks are involved in it. And maybe it's a different situation. But I think at some point, like there has to be a trade where you're acquiring a star. There has to. I mean, and if not, something has gone wrong, and Leon Rose hasn't gotten the chance to do that because Jim Dolan has decided to make a change. I just think at some point in the Leon Rose tenure, there's going to be this kind of trade that we've been talking about really since.
They got hired
2020. Yeah. So that's why I'm hesitant to say that this would be the defining decision. I could be wrong, but I just would be surprised if they never pulled the trigger on something.
That's fair enough. Okay. So the two questions I want to ask you, one is I always preface when I'm going to ask you an unfair question. I don't think this is an unfair question though. I have, as I know you have paid attention to all the reporting out there, cannot get it straight whether the Knicks offered a third pick of their own that they wanted to top 5 protect, or whether that third pick was the Bucks pick. Can you shed any light on that to any extent?
Yeah, my information was there was a third fully unprotected first that was on the table
not with RJ.
Yeah, that didn't include RJ.
Okay,
right. Exactly.
That is
exactly. And
was a third heavily protected Knicks pick also? Do you know if it was ever on the table with RJ?
I don't know. I don't know if it was or it wasn't.
Okay,
I don't.
That's all I wanted to know. That's thank you. The second thing, and I think we could get this one done with quick because I don't really know what there is to say about it. After hearing the Mitchell press conference, after hearing his pod with Woj and his speaking to Brian Windhorst also after that presser, and honestly, after hearing the way that RJ spoke in his the MSG thing, which I admittedly did not watch all of, but I have seen a few clips, it feels like there was an event, whether it was Sunday night, Monday morning, but a thing that happened, whether it was a miscommunication, whether it was a conveyance of a misinterpretation. Are you under the impression that something, I'm just going to leave it vague, something happened that threw this off?
Well, the thing that I know is, people who were briefed on these talks, I don't know if like putting a timestamp on it even makes sense, but I can't do that because I don't remember specifically when I had heard, but it must have been late July or early August. I can't remember. Sorry. There was a time though when people that were briefed on the talks felt like, hey, it's happening. Like it's going to happen. It's a matter of the Knicks coming up, Utah coming down, them figuring it out. And I'm not the first person to say that. A lot of people said that, they felt that it was just a matter of what it was going to be. But I think that was a legit feeling from both teams. And obviously Donovan Mitchell felt that way as well, that it was going to happen. That was the most likely outcome. I don't know where it went sideways. Obviously with RJ Barrett and the deadline that, ESPN and Adrian Wojnarowski reported about, the deadline that Leon Rose set, there were deals, there were packages with RJ and without RJ that the Knicks felt good about at that point. And I don't know, maybe something happened there where Utah just said, hey, we're gonna try to squeeze everything out of you guys, and if you don't get to where we want, that's it. We're moving on. I don't know, but clearly there was so much momentum for this thing to end up with Donovan Mitchell in New York that he even felt it was going to happen. And one of those things. It's a head scratcher, but it happens in this league. Like, there's so much momentum towards player X ending up in city X, and everybody talks about it, and it's a real thing, but nothing's done until it's done. And that's something that if you're a Knicks fan, you've learned over and over again.
Yes. I have to laugh at the deadline thing, which is still like,
I guess they wanted to get him off the table. Maybe. I'm not sure why there was one, but
me and you both, Ian.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's move on. Spinning it forward, as you termed it. Do you think this front office is shaken by the events of the summer? Or do you still think they have a steely resolve that their plan is a good plan and that they still, perhaps more importantly, have the ability to execute that plan?
Yeah, I think the first thing I think about is like when I hear people say, Knicks fans feel this way, Knicks fans feel that way. I don't think you could say that because the fan base, there's so many fans feel different ways about different topics about this team. I think with the front office too, there's, it's a big front office. There's several influential voices. So, it's hard for me to answer because maybe there could be one influential voice that is shaken, another that feels that resolve that you referenced. I do think that generally the idea hasn't changed in terms of, having the ammunition to make a trade when the situation presents itself. Is there more onus on that next opportunity? Do the Knicks have to be more aggressive? Do they have to, maybe give up more than they would because they passed on Donovan Mitchell? I think there could be something. I think that could be an element the next time around. And if I was going to give you a blanket answer, my assumption would be everything is not like hunky dory in the aftermath of this thing.
What is everything hunky dory with this thing?
People not know that? Yeah, I feel like I think my mom said that to me when I was a kid, and it's one of those things that I probably just used. That was
I still used 50s. It.
So yeah, and everyone's not singing Kumbaya. Is that another way to say it?
That's a good one. I like Kumbaya.
Yeah, I don't think it's not as if everybody came out of these negotiations, feeling excellent and feeling sure that everything went the way that they had wanted to, and every decision was kind of foolproof. I think it's fair for me to say that, because I think, that's globally what you would assume coming out of something like this.
Which then I think begs, for me at least, the next obvious question is like, okay, if it is about just continuing to increase the value of assets, one would think that would potentially influence how they wanted to go about this season as far as minutes distribution and role distribution. Do you, again, I know there's been a lot of noise after the trade did not go down. Do you get a sense that there is, I don't want to say a reconsideration of how this season needs to go for it to be a successful season for the franchise? Because thus far through 2 years, as far as I could see, it's just been about let's win as many games as possible. And then that changed a little bit, I guess the last, 20, 30 games last year. Do you get a sense that there has been some sort of a shift perhaps amongst some people?
The thing that I think just in general on that, I just think with Tom Thibodeau, his objective night in and night out is to win the game. And for that to change would be a pretty big shift. I know late last year, they played the young guys, the second half of the season, even though they played the young guys. But if you kind of look at it, injuries, I think, played a role in a significant amount of how that shifted as the season went along. So if Tom Thibodeau ends up playing Quentin Grimes like ahead of Evan Fournier, I think it's because he feels like Quentin Grimes gives him the best chance to win that night. If he plays Cam Reddish significant minutes, because he feels like Cam Reddish gives him the best chance to win the game that night. And I think any deviation from that in terms of we're going to give Cam Reddish 20 minutes because we want him to develop kind of on the court and to see where he is based on XYZ, even though it might not give us the best chance to win. I can't see that shift in mindset taking place with Tom Thibodeau. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe conversations have been had where, he's totally shifted, but that's who he is. That's been who he is for his entire time in the league. So it would be a big shift for him to kind of approach things so differently coming into this year.
You know how many times I've been like, man, I hope Ian's wrong about this one. And what's funny? Doesn't usually work out that way for me. A couple more.
Listen, I could be wrong. Like maybe
you always say that. And yet,
the minds, I don't like. Could be. We'll see.
I'm going to give you an over/under of 0.5. So, take the over or the under. I'll give you 4 players: Cam, Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, or Julius Randle. So basically, do you think one of those players or more will be traded before opening night?
I'll say no.
Yeah.
But I don't think and this is obvious to say, because it's probably true of every team, but I don't think the idea of being totally set on everything between now and opening night is the case. I think there's different scenarios that are, as any team would are kind of in play. But if I had to guess, my guess right now is those guys are less likely to be dealt than they are to be on the roster in Memphis, when the Knicks are in Memphis, I should say.
Okay. Yeah, 2 seasons now under this regime with Tibbs, this is what I've talked myself into. They seem to like to go into the year without any massive distractions. I mean, I don't know if you want to call Knox kind of hanging out on the outside of the rotation 2 years ago as a distraction, or last year there really wasn't anything. Do you think that would bother this regime if, again, so we're going into camp and okay, well, there's no obvious spot for Cam. Do you think they would just kind of roll the dice and be like, well, maybe someone gets hurt, maybe this, maybe that? You think that would be a possibility?
I think that I think the idea of then the rotation, Tom Thibodeau, I think, is going to have last say on the rotation, and maybe somebody, people talk to him and he changes his mind on things that it was clear that he had made up his mind on last year, which in particular, clearly, at least early on, Cam Reddish, was not in his rotation. Maybe he changes his mind. But I think he's going to have the ultimate decision on rotations and minutes. I'd be surprised if that changed. The other thing too is if I think he's going to give everyone a chance, a clean slate in training camp. And if Cam Reddish or another player comes into camp in peak shape, and it's clear that player is head and shoulders above the players who are at his position, I think Tom Thibodeau is going to give that player a fair shake, whether it's Reddish, who hasn't been in the rotation, or another player who maybe we're not talking about. So it's a long-winded way of saying I think he'll have the green light to do what he feels is best for the team, and I also think that he wouldn't come in with hard preconceived notions, particularly a Cam Reddish. If Cam Reddish comes in and he kills in training camp in the preseason, I don't think Tom Thibodeau is going to say, well, I didn't want to play him the first few weeks after the trade, so I'm not going to play him now.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Two more on the mega chat here. You mentioned that you'd be surprised if there was not they didn't figure out a way to use these assets that they have to make a big trade at some point. Do you think they have, like, we all imagine like they have a whiteboard up of like their top 5, like a fantasy football draft or something, like guys they want? Do you think they have targets, or do you think it's kind of like, because like I think that I would hope / guess that they saw this Donovan Mitchell thing coming down the pipeline and they were kind of preparing for it. Obviously, we don't know that for sure. Do you think they have like a name or names, or do you think they're just kind of like waiting to see what shakes free?
I think they know like what could come about. But like, I think that it's hard to like plan for anything, definitively, because who the heck knows where things go, especially with this league and star players. So, everybody's kind of, I think, keeping an eye on Oklahoma City and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Are you? Do you really think that's a possibility?
The reason why, like, just logically, it seems to add up to me is just look what OKC's doing. Look at what they've done. They're stockpiling picks, and like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, incredibly talented, young, yet you could see a world where like he's on like a kind of a different timeline than the rest of the team. And also, I mean, does a player going where he is in his NBA career, does a player like that like want to just put up numbers on teams that are terrible for the next few years? So I think that's why everybody's keeping an eye on it. I'm not here to suggest that Presti's ready to make a trade, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, doesn't want to be in OKC. Just looking at it like everyone else is from a big picture sense, it seems like there's something that could be there. Andrew Wiggins, because of the finances involved with Golden State and what they would have to pay to bring him back in a luxury tax sense, like that's something that the teams are going to keep an eye on. And the Phoenix Sarver players very upset. Clearly, big voices in the league very upset with how the NBA handled the Robert Sarver situation. Is there anything, not to make it about basketball, because it really is not at all, but
no.
Is there something that happens there where, a player says, I do not want to play for this owner, tells his agent, get me out of here. So, there are always different scenarios that come up. But the thing with the Mitchell one was like, he wanted to be here and you had the assets to do it. It was like such a perfect marriage. And so by passing on it, you're betting that the next situation is going to be, I guess, more advantageous, or you're betting that your young core here, one or two of these guys is going to pop in a way that people don't expect. And then you're going to become a contender organically through that building of that young core. So it's an interesting decision and a risky decision, but look, we'll see how it plays out. I'm not a fortune teller. I know, it's hard to predict anything these days, particularly with the Knicks. So maybe everybody who thinks they made the wrong decision with Donovan Mitchell is wrong, and things turn in a good way for them. But it was a risk, and it was a big decision, and there are big ramifications to it.
Or you bet that Justin Zanuck was going to pick up the phone again. That may have been another wager that was placed. Last one. What would surprise you more? The Knicks win over 40 games this year, or the Knicks win under 30 games this year?
I think under 30. I think under 30 would surprise me more, and that would be bad news for everybody that's over there, because to take that kind of a step back and after the offseason played out the way it did, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, to fall back like that, not good. So that would surprise me, because I think the group that's here, like, they'll compete, and if you can defend, and Tibbs will have them defending despite some of the individual deficiencies on defense. If they're competing every night and they win, high 30s, mid 30s, high 30s, and end up competing for one of those playing spots, I think you could see how that is a reason for optimism going forward. But if you're talking about under 30 wins,
bad news.
Yeah, bad news.
Say no more. Ian Begley, you were awesome. Thank you so much. I don't need to tell anybody where to find you. SNY, all the platforms, at Ian Begley on Twitter. Did I forget anything?
No, but I want to say this, John, and I don't need to say this on your show because everybody already knows it, but I have 2 young kids, as you do too.
Yes.
I don't have time to read nearly as much as I want to. One thing I read, though, is the newsletter. And that is something that if you're a Knicks fan, you care about the team, you want to know about the team, you want insights into what might happen, but also like a cogent analysis of what has happened, you read the newsletter. So everybody who's watching this, I'm sure already does, but just I wanted to say that because that's a place that I have to go when I want to just try to see how someone else like yourself is making sense of what's going on, because you always make sense of it. So I appreciate you doing what you do.
I'm going to change the newsletter's name to My Therapy Couch, because that is all it is. It is just the way that I deal. That means an incredibly great deal to me. Thank you, Ian. Yes, the link for the newsletter is in the description below. Andrew was telling me to say that. Ian Begley, you're the man. Thank you.
John, thank you for having me, my friend. I look forward to doing this again soon. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.